we want sustainable performance, shouldn't we also be building sustainable coaches? You can't pour into players consistently if your own cup is empty. The moment I realised that the weight I was carrying, when I noticed the kind of emotional spillover, I was taking that environment home with me. In rugby, we often assume resilience without sort of educating around recovery. And I feel that high performance still needs a structured decompression. Kept asking myself the main question, who's looking after the coach? Because coaching can become so isolating, and often it's insecure. Yet we don't have the structured support systems in place in the same way we do for players.
Welcome to Coaching Culture, the podcast about cultivating culture and leadership. I'm Ben Herring and I've been loving this side of the game for bloody ages. Today's guest is Stuart Edwards. Stuart is a rugby coach and wellbeing researcher with experience across community, academy, university and international environments. He is Defence Coach and Analyst for the Finnish national team. Before that, a policeman for 18 years. These days, Stu is doing something that all coaches should be interested in listening to. Through his honours degree at the University of Wales, Trinity St David, he is undertaking, to the best of our knowledge, the first ever deep diving academic research into stress factors and mental health support systems for rugby union coaches. Yes, I will repeat that. Research into mental health support systems for rugby union coaches. How good? How important for this audience? Stu, welcome to the podcast.
Great, thanks so much for having me, Ben. To be honest with you, it's quite weird sitting on this side of the screen from normally listening to it. But yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for the platform to discuss this amazing research.
Well, Stu, it's such an amazing amount of type of research that you're doing, and very topical for this audience, man. Like it's so important. Like it's one of those forgotten things. So, mate, how did it all come about? How did this deep dive into this sort of research? What inspired it?
Well, to be honest with you, bit of lived experience, a lot of lived experience. And, after listening to a lot of your podcasts and experiences I've had, it's understanding that coaching that kind of demands that stability, but what the public kind of sees is only a fraction of what the role is. So the moment I realised that the weight I was carrying, when I noticed the kind of emotional spillover, I was taking that environment home with me. And that was one of kind of the early sparks of my research. And I just wanted to understand whether other coaches were also carrying this invisible load. And early data so far suggests that they are. And from the environments I've worked in or been involved in at the moment, as you quite rightly said, within community clubs, I've been lucky enough to be around academies, university settings and national programs. The more I noticed how much of the emotional load coaches were carrying. For me, we talk a lot and quite rightly about player welfare and the player mental health. But I kept asking myself the main question, who's looking after the coach? Because coaching can become so isolating. It's relational, it's performance driven, and often it's insecure. Yet we don't have the structured support systems in place in the same way we do for players. So my research really asks a simple question, to be honest with you, Ben. If we want sustainable performance, shouldn't we also be building sustainable coaches?
You have a big hand up from me right away, Stu. Like if you want sustainable performances, we've got to have sustainable coaches. And so what does the data that you're collecting sort of look like? I know you go through, you're interviewing some pretty expansive coaches from the likes of Paul Gustave, Conor O'Shea, Stuart Lancaster, a whole plethora of coaches. What sort of stuff are you getting them to share, and what sort of insight are they giving you?
I've been quite lucky that they're giving a lot of personal insight and a lot of shared experiences. And like I said, it's been quite relational because even though it's on a different level compared to where I've coached, they've been very open and honest about their sort of experiences. And to be honest with you, it's quite shocking in what they've actually gone through, to be honest with you.
Yeah, what's mate, without any names or anything, but just like what's the sort of sentiment that coaches are finding, like some big generic ones?
There's some big generic ones. There's a lot of, coming back to what I mentioned earlier on, a lot of isolation. When the going gets tough, it always ends up on one person's shoulders, unfortunately. And we expect them to pick up and deal with everything when they're managing up, they're managing staff, they're managing players, and a whole plethora of external factors, and they're the only people that are taking this in, and it's a heavy load to carry.
It's and I think what your research will be highlighting too is it's how common it is, right? Like this is not one off. You've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of coaches, broad spectrum, and it's pretty evident already, right?
Definitely is. So at the moment, when I'm speaking to them, it's like the coaches are really struggling, and it's not just on that one level. I think it's quite complexity with everything that's going on at grassroots level. You've got the staff, the coaches are juggling full-time jobs, family life, safeguarding responsibilities, and sort of, how can I say, increasing parental sort of expectations. And bearing in mind, a lot of these people are they're volunteers, and that load is quite significant. From what I've seen in academy and performance level, the kind of stress sort of shifts then into sort of job insecurity, contract pressures type of thing, selections, scrutiny, and then we go into sort of the higher end of the game where KPI sort of driven environments have a huge load on these people. And what's driving that? It's that increased sort of how can I say, insecurity, scrutiny, that increased expectations, social media, a lot of governance and demands issues, and in some cases, definitely reduced relational support. So for me, having spoken to all these people, and from what I've experienced, the game is professionalized really quickly, but the support for the coaches hasn't evolved at the same pace.
Yeah, even even when you talk about those different levels, right? When you talk about that community level, you do look to the coach of your rugby team as a leader, and that they've got their stuff all together. But as a general, there's no sort of support, or generally it's just a parent that's put their hand up and said, okay, I'll do it. And then they're wearing this expectation, this scrutiny, these governance things, which are like, what's going on here? Even at the grassroots level like that, there's pressures and stresses which you don't really realize until you're in it, right? Is that what you found?
100%, yeah. Well, you hit the nail on the head. You got if you go community game, you got coaches coming home from work, having a stressful day in work, having to give up their own time away from their family, friends, and not only that, by the time they get there, they've probably got to set up the training session, get all the pads out, get everything they need, make sure everyone turns up on time, make sure there's first aid there, make sure the session plan's in place, make sure they stick within the time period, because the boys don't want to stay there too late, especially if it's raining and it's wet, if you're from Wales. But it's if you throw all that in the mix, it can turn into a pressure cooker.
Well, and it flows to everywhere. I remember 20 years ago when I was coaching amateur club level stuff, the amount of time I had to spend, like I'd finish my day at work and then I'd have to go, well, I'd want to go, but then my wife would be like, oh, are you going again? I was like, yeah, this is all, this is not changing anytime soon. And then you'd be running around as a taxi service, all this other stuff, and picking up, and you spend so much time, volunteer time, which is lovely. You love it. But it does have a little bit of a taxing effect on your home life. And if you're not getting sort of a little bit of a sounding board on sometimes how to deal with that, when does it stop and when does it end? And are you compromising your smaller family's well-being too?
Well, yeah, and if you lose your support network, then that's a really lonely place to be.
Yeah, well, it's not just subjectively from my own experience. Relationships outside the game for coaches is something which is always challenged because of that concept that you're giving so much to another group of people, you're forgetting about, you would argue, one of the most important groups of people, which is your home family life. And it's not an uncommon phenomenon that a coach's family life isn't as good as the environment they're creating in their team.
No, it's not. It's not. Yeah. It's been a very sort of very consistent theme in the interviews, and it's been brilliant.
Is that right? Is it loud and clear that coaches struggle with their own home lives?
Yeah, that balance is difficult, as you well know. Everyone will know.
And even I enjoyed when you jumped up to sort of that academy level stuff when there's job security stuff. So when you do get sort of into that sort of the first step on the rung, then you have that sort of academy systems, or when you start to get paid a little bit of money to do this thing, then it's job security pressures. Is that big on the list?
Yeah, not so much in Wales, because I think the academy structured in Wales, they've got a lot of the ex-pros that are sort of helping out as well. So I can imagine within the Premiership, probably because there's more coaching options. There's more coaching jobs in that academy setup, because in Wales, as you know, we're operating with 4 teams. So it's going to be very limited opportunities for sort of coaches who aspire to get to that sort of level. And like I said, I was lucky to go in and spend a bit of time with them just to upskill myself. And then you're working with these guys who are literally carrying so much stress because, again, their performance driven is creating those players, developing those players, but still trying to get some results at the same time.
I think it's just an interesting little thing. You just sort of triggered in me there. There's like, I suppose ex-players, professional players are kind of used to that sort of insecurity on the job front because ultimately they've been playing a career where if you're not playing good, you're out and you get cut. And for most people, that's not normal that you could just be sacked if sometimes you get dropped just because the coach doesn't really like the way you do things. You might be a good player, but the boss doesn't like it, so you just get released at the end of the season. And as a professional player, you sort of get used to that dynamic where you're a little bit mercenary to a point and you get used to, righto, well, that's just that and nothing too personal and I'll move on. But for the bulk of people in the everyday sort of job to go into that, it's very different where, oh, sheesh, if I don't front here, I'll be gone and then I'll have nothing. Yep. It's not nice, is it? It's different stress.
Yeah, that's if you haven't got anything to provide your family or pay your bills, then it's a different stress altogether, isn't it?
Mate, but I look forward a little bit later in the show. I'd love to just talk about some of the thought process you have around systems that coaches could put in. But for now, mate, I'd like to dive into a little bit into sort of some of your background, if I may, mate, just to get a little bit of stuff. Well, you're coaching in Finland.
Yes,
well, mate, that's an amazing place to coach. And we were just chatting off here about some of the cultural differences there. How's that experience, firstly?
That experience has been absolutely amazing. And to be honest, it was kind of changed my life. A massive outlook. The people in Finland are just, how can I say, so amazing. They're really welcoming. From a coaching point of view, going out there, we've got a great bunch of players who, you're coaching them, you ask them to do something, and you ask them to correct, and they just do it. And because they're sponges, they're really great. And they just want to sort of, how can I say, they want to pull the information from you. And it's been a joy to experience that. And not only that, get to know them, because Finland's such a huge country that we got some players who literally drive 6 hours to get to the training camp. So when they turn up a bit sort of tired and weary, you're like, you okay? But it's good to see them, the different types of people from the different types of areas of Finland. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, what an experience, especially for a coach educator like yourself, to just have that joy of the game again, right? Where people are just want to be there and they're traveling for miles. Just the weather that some are going with. You talked about off air that sometimes you have, like when you're training in Finland, a negative 40 degrees sometimes, and then you go off and you play Gibraltar in the same time zone, which is positive 20 degrees, and having that sort of swing. Mate, that must be fascinating to as a coach to get used to that sort of dynamic.
The first time it was for me, to be honest with you, like coming from, I was lucky enough to go to Finland and spend Christmas, a little bit of Christmas and New Year's in Finland with my partner's family. So it was, I think, like I said, it was minus 17 the first day and it was minus 40 when we left. And like I said, came back to sunny Wales for a couple of days where it's been raining constantly and it didn't get over 3 degrees. And then literally within a fortnight, a fortnight, I went from minus 40 to plus 20. And I don't think the body recovered from the cold to the warmth. But it's a really great experience. Finland in the snow is just magical. It's amazing.
Yeah. What are you picking up as a coach coming from Wales to Finland? What's some of the coaching joy that you're getting?
Communication, learning to speak a little bit slower. But no, it's good because it's understanding. Probably language barrier can be a little bit tricky, but that's because, again, what I say and how we say things in Wales is different to what they say and what they understand in Finland. So it's been great trying to build those connection with the players and able to get that sort of level of understanding of what I want from them and what they want from me. So it's been fantastic building those relationships and connections with. We're lucky we've had around about 60, 70 people through the camps and the games, and it's just everyone is different. Everyone is amazing. It's just those bonds and creating. That's what I like the most, to be honest. I'm a real sort of relationship kind of person, and I love. I'll speak to them all day, and that's the one thing I've taken from there is how nice and how sort of wonderful the people are out there.
Yeah, it seems like a common thread when you talk to coaches that are coaching interesting places like Finland. It's just about the people, isn't it? The joy that you get to go and play a game essentially with 40 to 50 different people, and you get to learn from all those people and have that experience and a shared bond and a community, like a pre-made community, right? You're just walking into like, oh, wow, and that's the joy of this game. And in that community, you're going to have people of all different walks of life. So you will resonate with people fantastically in there because there'll be your people in there.
And it's been great, and we're actually flying out there again tomorrow, so I'm really looking forward to catching up with them. Since Gibraltar, unfortunately, it'll be in the snow.
And mate, before this, you were into policing for 18 years. Now, how has that role helped your coaching, and what does it help you as a person?
It taught me a lot, to be honest with you. It was involved in a lot of horrible things, a lot of good things. You see in that environment, you see the worst of society, unfortunately. But I will always go back to policing taught me kind of three things. Firstly was the stress accumulates quietly, it builds quietly. You know, you can go from call to call to call doing a 12-hour shift, and you could be going from anything from a simple theft to sudden death, or someone in real crisis moment where there's life on the lines. You know, that's a lot to sort of take on board emotionally and physically. Secondly, this was probably the main thing that I felt that peer support systems mattered enormously. Just to have that sort of group of people who kind of understood what I was doing or what I went through kind of relates to coaching, because as you say, when you're the head coach or assistant coach and your head's on the chopping block, so to speak, and you've got to make those decisions, you need to be able to speak to someone who's kind of been through those situations to help you, guide you, maybe help you understand what you're sort of experiencing. And then thirdly, and I think this is really important and it sort of goes back to coaching culture, you know, as a leader, you set that emotional tone under pressure. So it's you guys, when we're coming back to all these things, you've got to make sure that you can understand what's going on and deal with this pressure. So in policing, obviously, we were trained then to recognise trauma exposure and critical incident stress. But in rugby, we often assume the resilience without sort of educating around recovery. And I feel that high performance still needs a structured decompression.
How do the police do it? How do the police create the systems that recognise trauma?
I think when you picked up from when you were dealing with a sort of a traumatic incident, you'd end up with a trauma sort of informed manager. Then you'd be taken away and they're spoken to and given sort of a little bit of sort of counselling or checkovers to make sure that you can cope with mechanisms really to deal with those sort of incidents. So they were only short, don't get me wrong, because, you know, in a week you could end up going to several traumatic incidents. I like to use the word, you become desensitized and you kind of compartmentalize everything and put things aside. So you can box this problem up and then just move on to the next one.
And that's a good thing or not a good thing?
Not a good thing.
No.
Not a good thing. Since leaving the police the last 3 years, it hasn't been good. Sort of, I think it was easier when you're dealing with stuff constantly because you know the next thing's coming. But when that all stopped, it's like a box opened and then you can't put the lid back on.
So they had systems where they had actually people there you could check in with, and it was almost if it was deemed to be of a certain priority, you have to go and clock in with this person, right? Like an expert who knows how to deal and recognise trauma symptoms.
Yeah, that's right. But it wouldn't be like a consistent thing. It would be like a 1 or 2 sort of check in and then, right, if you're okay, then off you go to the next one.
Yeah. Well, it's a big organisation, isn't it? The police system, right? So
yeah,
there's probably those other constraints around that, isn't there? Like time and money and
100%.
Oh, mate, some of the stuff that you just talked about that you're learning from the police, such as one, stress accumulates quietly. For me, that's coaching pressures, right? That's what you'd be seeing in the research. Like we as coaches, there is no support network. There's no systems. I've certainly never even ever been told around, here's what you do. But the little stresses that come is like just little things, right? Like when a player challenges you, why are we doing that? And then that feeling that goes, or I don't like this drill, this is a crappy drill, or I'm pissed off that I'm not selected. Those don't seem like massive traumatic events, and they're not. but they accumulate quietly. And if you get enough of those training, and you probably do, you probably get half a dozen of those little things. You're right, mate. They
definitely
accumulate up, right? And then how do you get over them and through them? And is it just, do you think it's just time, or do you think there's little things that you can do to improve on
I
that?
think I've been spoken to a lot of people, it's been amazing to me just to highlight what you're saying, the hidden stresses that I think people don't see. And that's why I kind of call it the invisible workload, because that's what it is. The emotional sort of regulation you get in meetings with players, with, managing conflict between staff. I would say absorbing sort of player distress, as you quite rightly said, not being happy with the drill, not being selected. And then if you go the higher end of rugby away from community, you're dealing with handling board politics, with your other staff, then that selection conversations. Coaches often act as an emotional shock absorbers of an organisation, really. And that load isn't in the job description, but it's constant. So how you deal with it, I think you need to have a good team around you, good co-coaches. You probably got that a little bit more in the professional game than you would in the community game, because 9 times out of 10, it's just you're either on your own or you're with someone else. So you've got to have that support network to, as you quite rightly said earlier on, about having that soundboard to have a good chat about it.
Yeah, coaches are emotional shock absorbers. That's a great phrase, because that's so true. But then you stop and think about it. No coach has been prepared for that. It's part of the job for sure, but it's not in the job description, but it's a massive part of the job, especially on head coaches. And then you're just throwing someone that's not got any level of experience in that side of things into that role, right? And then expecting them to be all good with it and not have any baggage as a result of it.
Yeah, 100%.
You also mentioned the co-coaching stuff and managing your co-coaches, because that's a massive relational piece. What sort of insight have you delved into around that side of things?
I think that's a good one, because some people have mentioned they've been to clubs where they haven't been able to select their backroom staff, whereas then you got someone coming into your sort of coaching environment and not agreeing with what you're doing. So then you got issues around your philosophy, how you want to play the game, how you want to sort of your team selection. But then you speak to people then who've got a tight-knit group, and they work through as best they can. They look after each other. They have that sounding board. They have those chats, and they challenge each other sort of respectfully in a good way. But as you well know, it's in the pro game, everyone's vying for that next step up. Some people are, some people aren't. Don't get me wrong, I'm not generalizing, but there's always that one person with ambition who will do anything to get the top job that they want, really, isn't it?
Yeah, this is a whole nother realm of thinking, right? Like a head coach is almost like a jack of all trades, isn't it?
Yeah, they got to wear a lot of hats.
Yeah.
A lot of hats.
A lot of hats, mate. And how do you juggle that side of things? How do you juggle? Well, because you don't get taught how to juggle some of this other stuff. How do you do it?
No, you don't. I think for me personally, I've done a lot of research myself, done a lot of looking into well-being and what you need to do and how you need to look after yourself. But a lot of coaches have turned their hand to sort of creating those good habits to ensure that they're going through set parameters for themselves, so that they don't deviate from that, and they make sure that they've got their sort of, how can you say, their little systems in place, like exercise, walking, spending time with the family, leaving everything at the door, no laptops, no phones in the house, to make sure that they're present with their families as well. So I think a lot of people do things differently, and that's why people are amazing, because everyone's different. Some people like to go to the gym and thrash themselves, and other people are literally shut the door. I'm with my family. This is what's grounding me. This is what's getting me back. And I must say, I say 99.9% of the people have all mentioned that they have amazing partners who fully understand what they're going through. And if they didn't have them, from what I can see, I don't know how they would have coped, because like yourself, Ben, you've been coaching in different parts of the world, and your family moved around with you. Other people have moved to coach in a different part of the world, but haven't taken their family with them. So that gives a different sort of dynamic and a different stress. Again, missing key sort of life incidents with families, birthdays, children's concerts or anything. So it's that adds a different level of stress again.
I think what you're talking about here, mate, is just like essentially creating little systems for yourself that you can just flick back to, right? Like that's kind of whatever that may be that suits you and your personality, like sounding boards, exercise regimes, clock off times. That's 99%. You said, like, the best. All the coaches find ways, right? I think it goes back then to this peer support system matters that you talked about in the police, because
Yeah.
when you have a peer that's going through, or preferably more experienced, that's gone through it, right, and they're able to offer up their little systems to see if they work for you, that's a key piece. It's almost like a little bit of mentoring, isn't it? Like, we often talk about, your players have got, the more experienced players in a team they can follow and things. But as a coach, you're kind of top of the food chain in most teams. And unless you're that way inclined, you don't necessarily reach out to another coach. Even another coach at your level is important. Just in here, I had one of the other schools here, the director of rugby here, we had an hour chat the other day, and it was just wonderful. Just, mate, what are you struggling with? What are you doing at your school? And we're competing schools, but just to go through and chat with, oh, you're having that issue as well, and how are you dealing with this one? And just that shared experience is awesome, and it just puts you at ease to go, okay, so it's not just me in this program, it's all programs, and this guy who's got this very successful one is going through it too, and that's what he's doing. That's a good idea, and I might. And when you get to that level, it makes, but you've got to put that sort of olive branch out sometimes, right? And sort of be brave. But would you have any other suggestions around that?
No, I think, to be honest with you, I think you're looking at sort of creating that kind of healthier sort of coaching sort of environment then, aren't you, really? So I think you don't have that support now. You don't really check in with the coaches unless you do it yourself. But why can't we arrange a day for all coaches to come together? Why can't we arrange coffee mornings for everyone to get together and speak to each other on a human level, rather than worrying about giving away tactics or we're playing you on the weekend? So I think it's just having that sort of peer-to-peer support and everyone having the ability to park the ego and just pick the phone up and say, are you okay? I've been through this. This is what I did. It might not help you, but this is what helped me. And then, as you say, when you have those small chats with people, something will resonate with you. And then you will just pick it up and go and say, well, you know what, that's kind of helped me in that. And that could be the difference between having a good day or a bad day, or changing the way you approach your coaching going forward.
Park the ego.
Yeah.
Is the ego come up a few times in the research?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're looking at there's a lot of barriers there, isn't there? Because coaches don't want to, at the end of the day, especially if you're a head coach, you've got to have all the answers because everyone comes to you for the answers. And I don't think it's getting a lot better. I think it's been quite balanced within the research, I must say. But a lot of people have said that they wouldn't reach out sort of willingly. And some have said, like yourself, definitely, it's great to have that chat and trying to get that sort of baseline of understanding of, right, you've been through this, help me out here, sort of thing.
I think even further to that is parking the ego is a quite hard thing to do sometimes. The first thing is you don't even really realize you've got it unless you're making a conscious effort to be aware that actually this is a rubbish thinking process I'm going through. Why is that? Well, what's my ego saying here? And the ego is essentially, thinking it's all about you, all that stuff. It's ego. Having the ego is not a bad trait. It's just how you manage it. Like, ego keeps you competitive in that desire and that hunger, but it also can make you defensive and righteous and all that sort of stuff. So you just need to make sure you own it and it doesn't own you, I think is the thing. But that again is you have to talk to people to sort of understand that. And sometimes that sounding board partner is the best person to pull you up, right? To say, come on, you're getting out of line.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you're right. And I think it's coming back to that. I don't like to say it, but that lovely word that's banded about, that sort of psychological safety. I mean, for coaches, I think it means you need to be able to say, look, do you know what? I don't know this. Or say, hands up, I need that little bit of support now. What can we do? But, I've made a mistake. Yeah. I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have picked that person. I shouldn't have gone with this tactic. But I think it's by creating that sort of environment without fear of immediate judgment or career damage. If a coach can't be vulnerable in my eyes within their own staffing group, it becomes very difficult to model sort of a healthy behavior to players then. So that's why I think it's important. We need to sort of have those opportunities and have that ability to speak to people.
So what else, mate? So that psychological safety is a phrase that's used a lot, right? So how else does it look? What does it look like for coaches? You mentioned that vulnerability piece, but is there any others that have come up?
It's been mainly around that, to be honest with you. I think it's just something that, if a lot of people are in healthy environments, coaching environments, and I think a lot of people are building it on the basis of a lot of research they're doing themselves. So for me, I think, how can I say, in practice for coaching groups, I think if you're a head coach, I think you need to make sure that you've got that sort of, everyone's got that sort of clear role clarity within the group to make sure that healthy environment is there. I think there's honest upward feedback needs doing. I think mentoring structures definitely need to be put in place. A lot of people.
One honest, open, upward chat, did you say?
Upward feedback, yeah.
Upward feedback.
Honest upward feedback, yeah.
What does that look like?
So I would say that's probably more from assistant coaches up to head coaches. And then I would 100% say managing upwards within sort of the top end of the rugby spectrum is dealing with the expectations of the CEOs or the owners of these clubs, because I think sometimes they don't understand what the head coach is doing, what they're trying to achieve. So I think realistically, upward feedback is making sure, a lot of feedback is that the guys need to make sure that they're on board. They know what's going on. They know how you're trying to play. They know what you want to do. They know what the next year or two looks like if they kind of back you with your sort of recruitment, or not even that, just equipment for you to get the best of the players.
It's an interesting one because feedback generally is coach to player. That's the general thing. But this one is saying something different, isn't it, when you're talking?
Yeah, or maybe feed forward. I do like that word more than feedback, because if you're explaining to them what you expect, what you want, or what your expectations are, and this is how we want to play the game. The last thing you want is like a CEO or your director of rugby not knowing what you're doing. And it's just, if you keep, I think, from speaking to yourself as well, if everyone's kept in the loop and everyone knows what you're trying to achieve, I think that keeps a good sort of healthy environment for everyone.
I think you're right too. I think even that you mentioned at the very start is assistant coaches talking to head coaches. This is what I'm saying, or are we sure this is on the right direction? And you could even argue that the moment you get a player coming quietly and saying, do you think we're actually achieving what we wanting to get out of this training for the game or whatever like that? As soon as you're getting sort of senior players or any players coming and doing that, there's a bit of an upward feed forward system sort of in place, right?
Yeah, I think that's why it's valid, because a lot of assistant coaches, sometimes you can go into an environment where you might have applied for the job and got the role, and not knowing the head coach. You kind of get that sort of, if the relationship's not right, that perhaps bit of fear of approaching them, explaining, saying that, hang on, these guys are explaining to me, or there's something missing. So we're clearly missing something in either how our language or how we're sort of pitching what we want. I think it's a kind of having that ability to speak to them and say, right, something's going on. We need to get to the bottom of it. And how can we work this out to make sure that we're all okay and the players are okay, so we're all understanding what we want and how we're going to get things sorted.
Is that something that you'd recommend from the research, that putting a system like that in place is a really cool thing to have in?
Yeah, some of the environments I've been in, they do that already, which is great. But I think definitely, again, it comes back to what I mentioned earlier on. I think it's definitely that role clarity for everyone, because, I think everyone's got to be open to saying, right, this is what I'm seeing. This is my opinion. What do you think? And then you either go with it, or it gets sort of pushed to the side, or you meet halfway and say, right, okay, I can see where you're coming from. How can we fix this to make sure that everything's okay?
Yeah. The upward feedback, feed forward. You mentioned a mentoring system. That's
yeah, I think so. There's a mentoring structure I think is definitely needed, because, as you well know, you mentioned earlier on, when people are going through the sort of the dark days of coaching, when your team isn't really performing and you can't do any more. I'm getting a lot of people saying, they just work harder, but then working harder isn't really the answer. Sometimes it's just working that smarter. And I think that if you have a mentoring structure from, this goes from assistant coaches to, head coaches to director of rugbies to anyone really, that they've got to have that person to sort of, as Gilbert and Noka said to you, that critical friend to basically say, right, this is what I'm seeing. How can we get this back on track, or how can we work out a better way of sort of approaching what you're trying to do. So I think mentoring is brilliant.
Working smarter, not harder. I think that is a very common phrase, right? Like when the pressure comes on, you just knuckle down, you double down on the work rate, right? Is that definitely
That's coming through massively, that is, yeah.
what do you reckon that is?
I think it's just the fear of wanting to do more, to make sure that as an individual, you're there because you want to do the best you can do for those players. And if you're not hitting the note or hitting the right sort of level, then what can you do? The only way to do is right, I must do more. I got to do more. I got to do more to make sure that I can get what I need from these players in this team.
Yeah. And it almost becomes a little bit OCD-ish, doesn't it? Like I can't not show every single clip that could possibly happen, because if I was to leave one out and then it happened, it would be on me as not being due diligence here, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Man, it's funny how when the way you're nodding and going, oh yeah, this is
Yeah.
coming really clear through the research is phenomenal. Can I just jump back? Like I really enjoyed some of your police takeaways. The one, stress accumulates quietly, which is very relevant for coaching. Two, that's peer support system matters, which we've discussed is very important. But the other one you said was leaders set the emotional tone under pressure. Now, how is that's for me very replicatable in coaching too. Like pressure does funny things to everybody. What have you seen in the research? Where do the coaches go when the pressure comes on?
Well, yeah, not to give too much away. There's a lot of coaches. It's a tough place to be, especially when your back's up against the wall, isn't it? If you haven't got that sort of critical friend to speak to and get that support and sort of have that soundboard to say, right, this is what I'm doing. What do you think? You've been through this. What can you say? But for me, it's a tough one, to be honest with you. It is a tough one because they've got to. What can I think of this now?
Well, mate, I'll jump in just quickly, just around from a real subjective measure. Is like,
yeah.
As a player, when the coaches are under pressure and stressed, it comes off in you massively, right? You can feel that edge, you can feel that defensiveness, you can feel that sort of hustle in their voice, and I even know, like, gee, even at a relationship level at like home, when my wife's something's happened because she comes steaming in the door and everyone's like, oh, well, let's just be careful here. There's something's happened, and it's likewise with me, right? Like when I come home and I've had a tough day, but
Yeah.
when you're coaching, you're doing that to sometimes 30 people on a field, right? And it's like, oh, geez. That's for me the subjective emotional tone when pressure comes on. What are you coming across as?
And I think that's the problem because what you're absorbing, you're putting up in the players as well. So you need to try and have that clear sort of mindset and be able to be in a really good place to get the best out of yourself. And if you can get the best out of yourself, you can get the best out of other people around you. But if you're carrying that sort of weight on your shoulders, then and you're not performing, if you can have that opportunity to have that peer support system or any sort of support, I think that'll give people that extra 10% to give towards the other players and the team support, the team around them. It's massive. If you've got that emotional pressure, that's clearly going to come out, as you said. But for me, if you can manage that and you've got those opportunity and outlets to just improve you, then that's going to really help other people around you.
That's cool. And this data that you're doing, collecting, like it's a very hard thing to quantify sometimes, like this sort of, how are you sort of putting it together? So obviously you're doing lots of interviews, like hundreds and hundreds of interviews. How are you then sort of quantifying that and putting it into a body of work?
So I've got an online questionnaire as well, which has been brilliant. So I've had around about 85 responses from community, from a community level to pro level around the world, which has been absolutely amazing because it's quite interesting to see that it's not just in Wales, it's not just in England or the UK. This same thing is happening everywhere. So I'm using a lot of stats from there, but I'm going to do a lot of compare and contrast then from the actual face-to-face interviews with everyone, because I'm asking the same questions are there. But it's all based on sort of the sort of coach stress levels, depression levels, sort of all sort of medical sort of questionnaires they're taken from. So we can quantify a lot from that, which is going to be when it's finished, I can't wait. Looking at the results now, it's just mind blowing. It's everything I expected, but it's frightening.
Is that right? Everything you expected, and more so.
Yeah.
Right. What's the frightening pieces without giving too much away already before you?
Well, to be honest with you, it's a lot of stress, a lot of lack of support. Probably is the best way to say.
Yeah.
Lack of
Any,
support.
and where you going post this research, where would you be going in terms of putting some frameworks in to help this phenomenon going forward?
Yeah, this is, listen, there's a lot of framework to be built around this, and I'm just scratching the surface with this initial research, because the findings I'm having now, that I think there's enough for another 6 or 7 researchers off the back of this. But for me, it's I'm going to be setting up something to make sure that we can put some sort of support network in place for coaches, and because it's definitely needed and it's not out there. Don't get me wrong, a lot of people are doing it privately. They're getting people in themselves, but nothing is given to them from organizations themselves freely. So realistically, for me, it's the best way to do is off the back of this research and information that I can put back to the coaches and have something in place to help them and support them through their coaching lives.
So what would be some of the, like, just if you had to give some big ones just off the bat, some of the healthier, sustainable coaching environments, where would you say is the big ones at the moment that you said, this is what it looks like in actual practice? Is it just things that we've talked about already around the
Yeah, we
peer
talked
support
about it
stuff?
already. I think it starts with 3 things really, doesn't it? Visibility, making a coach well-being something that's openly acknowledged and kind of not assumed because people think that everyone's okay. Conversation definitely is creating that sort of intentional space where coaches can talk honestly about load, pressure, and support. Again, going back to without giving away any of the tactics or
Yeah,
anything else
yeah.
like that. But for me, I think the third one then would be structure. We need to ensure that those conversations kind of aren't reactive and built into a sort of just built into organization to help people. We don't need to be intervening or helping people at the moment of crisis. We need to be there before. We need to be providing those support networks, understanding where they're going. And that might look like what we've spoken about, mentoring touch points, wellbeing reflections and reviews, or that peer support opportunities. So, and in all honesty, that doesn't require really a huge budget. It just requires intentionality.
But there's a couple of cool things there you mentioned, is that visibility piece is a start point. And I think you're absolutely right, because it's like, not that we've had our heads in the sands around coaches' mental health, but you've sort of been oblivious to the fact that it's happening to everybody. And then as soon as you sort of raise a bit of visibility, and what you're collecting is essentially the social proof that this is a real thing. Like every single coach you're talking to is saying, I'm struggling for a good chunk of time with this sort of stuff. And then what will be cool when your research comes out in time is that it'll really show visibility to this. Like, this is a genuine thing. This is not just something we're gut feeling. Here's the data from hundreds and thousands of coaches that have gone on the record. I guess you could almost equate it to like what's happening sort of in the concussion piece. Like it hasn't not been there for a long time, but all of a sudden enough players are getting it at once, coming together and going, this is a thing, right? Like we've got to we've actually got to come up with some systems here. And that what do you call that? That groundswell actually forces change, right?
Yeah, I think, like I said, it's gonna highlight quite a lot of things. We know what's out there, but again, unless it's visible, then nothing's gonna come about it. Like we say, we're all coaches, and as you well know, Ben, coaches don't talk about this thing, so it's just an assumed sort of thing that people are okay.
Visibility. Comms, be okay to talk about this stuff. This is like, for a lot of coaches, probably of our generation, we're still like a little bit leaned in the old way, which was very stoic and keep it to your chest and just get on with and do things, which we're a product of our environment. But we're on that cusp where the new environment is not going to be there. And so we're part of the gateway to this new way of doing things, which it's okay to actually talk about your feelings and how you're dealing with your stress.
And there is a definite switch, because speaking to some of the younger coaches, and they're quite open and honest. It's great. It is good.
It is good, mate, and sort of our generations, we're the locked door that can actually let the water flow down, right? Like up and down.
Yeah.
Because if we're okay doing it, then it's really going to pave the way for the next generation to be really comfortable doing this sort of stuff. And then you talked about the structure stuff, and I think that concept you said around be there before all the shit hits the fan, right? And
Yeah,
that's
100%.
important too. Like you don't want to be picking up the pieces and trying to patch something back together. You'd rather be making sure that you don't mind people going low, but you don't want them to not be able to get up.
You want to catch them before they hit there. And I think that by putting systems in place or, welfare systems to make sure that they have that opportunity to have that conversation, and that visibility of knowing where to go for that sort of support, because, a lot of it is speaking to a lot of coaches, there isn't awareness, there isn't sort of informal training, but a lot of them do a lot of research and find a lot of help themselves. And that's been a bit of a shock to me, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. And mate, what would be, if you had to give sort of like, if a young coach is sort of listening to this and feeling overwhelmed or sort of, I don't know, burnt out, what would you sort of say to them is about what to prioritize first?
Yeah, I would probably say burnout it's not a weakness. Burnout is prolonged stress without recovery. So I'd probably encourage them to sort of clarify what's within their control. And I'd go on to speak to someone that they trust to get that sort of sounding board or get it off their chest. Because as you know, as soon as you start talking about it, you start feeling a little bit better because the pressure comes off. Thirdly, I'd probably say reconnect with their why and why they started their coaching, because then that'll help you get grounded and sort of bring you back to sort of a bit more energized. And definitely then start to sort of protect one area of recovery for themselves per week. Because for me, you can't pour into players consistently if your own cup is empty.
There's a nice little analogy. You can't pour into others' cups if yours is empty. Got nothing to pour.
Nothing to pour. Empty.
Can't have that, mate, when you're wanting a coffee in the morning and there's none in the filter.
That would be bad.
Mate, our household goes crazy when that happens. It's like dad's walking around going, what's going on here? The kids aren't stealing it. Burnout is not a weakness.
No, it's not.
And that's a cool phrase because it has a little bit of that sentiment too. Like it's a little embarrassing to say I'm burning out, but it's there, right? I was certainly burnt out at times.
I think there's still a bit of a stigmatism or sort of a barrier for people to say that, look, I'm not struggling. I'm fine. I can carry on. I can do this and I'll work harder. Not knowing that they're putting that sort of more stress on their body again and again, because if they're working harder and they're struggling, then they're just putting more pressure on themselves.
Yeah. And sometimes like this mental burden can then manifest itself in physical burdens as well. Like you start getting physically ailing, you get little rashes, or you put on a bit of weight around the midriff, well, all that stuff, right? And you can probably see it in a lot of coaches that it's very common for coaches to blow out in terms of shape, in terms of they don't feel like exercising, they make up for it with overeating, getting their endorphins flowing through ways which aren't healthy, alcohol, food, all that stuff. Is that very common too?
That's been a bit of a trait, of some experiences, which again is quite sad because, these guys are, for me, I'm speaking to all these amazing people who are effectively living the kind of dream that I wanted. But sometimes the experiences they explain to me, I just feel that they just living a nightmare, because there's some of the experiences some of them have been through. It's from me, from a person on the outside who aspired to be that kind of professional top end coach. And obviously there's been quite a lot of stuff in the press recently. You just don't see what happens behind the scenes. It's something that you should be passionate about and you wanted to do becomes quickly turns into something that's not.
Isn't that funny? Like you're having this amazing insight to some of the world's best coaches, and it's losing the glamour when you're hearing the backstories of the role, right?
Yeah, it is, but it's circumstantial as well. And I think this is why this kind of research can help the future coaches, to be honest with you, because if we can get these systems in place, then we can have the people not experiencing these things. And I think that's the main thing, because, in this day and age, burnout is frequently about because everyone's trying to do too much, work-wise, family-wise, personal lives. I just think this is really important.
I couldn't agree more. And it's the start of this new sort of build-up, mate, to a new way of coaching, the new modern way of coaching, where we're taking the best bits from the ways of the past, but then we're also bringing in stuff which is going to make a real difference. And this sort of research that you're doing, Stu, I reckon is going to be that guiding light, I think, mate.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, mate. So where is it now, mate? Where's the research at? When's it coming out? What do you need in terms of support around really making this a milestone sort of project and a beacon out there? What do you need from the coaches here? And
so for me, I help really just, if you're happy to get involved and sort of take part in an interview or do an online questionnaire, whichever way is easier. The online questionnaire is anonymous. My current work is going to be sort of submitted in May, but I'm going to be continuing my research, because I think that this can't be something that's sort of a couple of months in and then say, right, okay, I've done my research and leave it there. I'm quite passionate to make sure that this continues, and I'm going to be cracking on really to make sure that I can get the right information and make sure I got all information around male and female game, because it's not just about men, Ben. This is about the female game as well, and female coaches. Not that I want to say that, because coaches are coaches. At the moment, within my research, females are underrepresented. But again, that's just something I'm trying to sort of get balanced. So anyone out there that's happy to sort of contact me and speak to me about their experiences, the more people we speak to, the more information we get to be able to put those sort of system and frameworks in place to support everyone to the best of their ability.
And this research will be, so it closes in May, and from there you'll then put in place the sort of the overview and what the outcomes were, and then you're going to make some like structural stuff around how clubs and organisations can actually help coaches deal with this mental side of the game.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, from as I said, from the information we've given here, it's been fascinating. It's been brilliant, and there's clear ways to put things in place to help coaches out. And I'm really looking forward to sort of continuing that and making sure that these get put in place through governance. And I'll speak to obviously all the relative governing bodies involved and World Rugby, and just to see what I can do to help change coaches going forward.
Stu, I think this is absolutely amazing stuff, mate. And I think it's really important that we actually address it and we come together as a community of coaches and just go about the well-being of everyone in it. So I'm going to leave in the show notes here the link. You can go fill out this questionnaire, and I think it's a massive thing you can be part of to change the landscape of coaching in this sport, which will flow on to others. And the work Stu's doing and the time and effort to compile this massive document and this massive research assignment will come back in spades for this profession, whether you're coaching as a professional or an amateur part of the game. So you'll find it in the show notes. Jump on. May is the deadline where it all gets compiled into one thing. And from there, hopefully we can change the landscape of how we operate as coaches. I'll just sum up, as I love summing up these little chats, and yours are pretty obvious, I think. But here's my three takeaways from you, Stu. Number one, coaches are emotional shock absorbers. Now, I think that's a really cool statement because it's very true. They take on the invisible load, and sometimes they take it home. And we never sign up for that side of things. It just becomes part of the job and part of the role. I would say, generally speaking, well, more than generally, I would say almost 100% of the time, we don't know what we're doing when it comes to that. We're just relying on our own experiences and just making do the best we can. To have something in place where we could potentially have a system and a procedure that helps that, my goodness, that would be a great thing. Number two, I loved your takeaways from your police time. 3 things you said: stress accumulates quietly, peer support system matter, and leaders set the emotional tone under pressure. And all of those things are relatable to a coaching profession. Policing has a huge correlation to coaching. Whilst we don't ever want to claim that we're policing a team, we are in that same leadership role, and we are thrown with the same stresses and strains that police officers are. So just to be aware that those 3 things are important in our everyday coaching lives, and just to be aware of them is important. And number 3, this is probably my biggest takeaway, and I impress and implore on all coaches that burnout is not a weakness. And there's a bit of a stigma from the past that it is. That's something you don't want to talk about or admit. But as soon as you do, as soon as you get a sounding board, as soon as you have a mentor or someone you can talk to around what you're going through, you'll realize that this is very common and your research will back this up. And you suggested reconnect with your why. And you can't pour into someone else's glass if yours is empty, which is what burnout creates. So the more you can front foot it, talk about it, a problem shared is a problem halved, and you're pretty halfway there. Stuart Edwards, what an absolute pleasure to have you on the Coaching Culture podcast today.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you very much for this.